So everybody, my name is Jason Connelly. We're so excited to have you here today. And today we're going to be talking about what is a producer. And we hope you can tell us. What we would like to do is we would like to share a little bit more about how the program is going to work. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to talk about a current project that we're on or a recent project that we've worked on, as well as what film is something that that inspired us to get into filmmaking. And then from there, what we would like to do is we'd like to go down the list of, and this would be the workshop portion of it. And in this kind of venue, it's kind of interesting to do a workshop, so I know you don't have necessarily pad and pens and stuff like that. But what we'd like to do is simply go through and I will read off a role, a producer role. Then we will ask you your input of what do you think that role does. And Heather is kind enough to scribe it for us. And then what we'd like to do is I'll read the dictionary definition of what that role is. And then we will hear from one of the panelists who have actually served in that role, and they'll tell you the real-world example. Let's see how they all line up or don't line up. So does that sound like a good plan for everybody there? Good. Thank you. We also want to keep this community going, so if you have questions throughout, please raise your hand. We want to keep this lively and informal with some structure, and hopefully we can all learn something along the way. So we're going to do that. So let us go ahead and start with the introductions, and we'll go ahead and right here. This is a note to the panelists. Please use a microphone because we are taping, and this will help with the sound. So here you go.
Hello. My name is Jacob Sunday. My credits are J. Arthur Sunday. I'm currently in post-production on a short that I produced and directed this summer. But prior to that, I worked on a couple features. I worked on Captain Fantastic, not as a producer, but then I went on and I worked on Buzzard Hollow Beef as a producer, which is a horror film. And you can see that on Amazon. And then there's another feature called Previous Man that I worked on as a producer as well, and that's in post-production. So, and then the film that got me involved in all of this, I think, was a student film called Jack and Virginia, and I acted in it. And I couldn't stand the way they were putting it together. And so it was sort of out of this frustration, I think, that I started writing my own stuff and working on my own shorts and learning how to put projects together and run them in such a way that you actually can see them come to life. So that's kind of where I started cutting my teeth, and then I've just been hanging on, kind of like a tick, trying to find the vein. So,
nice,
yeah.
Thank you. Good. Actually, go ahead and hang on to that mic. I'm going to go ahead. You guys get your own mic to share. I'm going to move this out of the way. And here you go. Here you go, Heather.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Heather Pilder Olson, and I am a producer and a writer and sometimes a director. I have produced several short films, most recently a film called Haunted Wharf, Ethel and the Merman. It's about the ghost of Ethel Merman and her companion, who is a merman. It's kind of a comedic horror film. So we're sending that out to festivals right now. I was an associate producer for a documentary called Gold Balls, which is about tennis players who are over the age of 80 who are competing for the U.S. national title in tennis. And that film premiered at SIFF, the Seattle Film Festival, in 2016. And went on to screen at 16 festivals, did quite well. And that film was also on Alaska Airlines this past spring, which was a lot of fun. And then it's going to be a short version on PBS, which we're excited about later this year. So, and then a couple other short films, Pearl, which did well at festivals. I was a producer for that. And then writer and a director for a short film called Date Stories, which went to a couple festivals as well. So I like producing when I'm really in love with the idea and the people, and producing can be very all-consuming. I love writing, so that's my primary thing that I like to focus on, and it's a lot of fun to write and then produce your own projects. And I like getting the team of people together to work on whatever that project is. That's a favorite thing as well. So.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. I'm Bry Troyer. I am a producer of They Reach, and I've also been a producer of some other things, including Never Mind the Knife, Crowbar, which was recently shot. They Reach is kind of going to town right now, so I'm excited about that. A lot of people in this room worked on They Reach, so I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. I like writing. That's my favorite thing to do. Writing, directing, producing. Those are kind of my three top things. I tend to land in the producer role most of the time, though. And the film that got me started, there are films that I watched that made me interested in film, and then there are films that I actually worked on that kind of got me started. Concerning the films that I worked on, I had a similar experience to Jacob. I wrote some short films, and then friends made the short films, and I thought, this could be much better. Of course, I was kind of a jerk about it, actually, at that time, because really I couldn't make anything any better than they could. But I did get into filmmaking at that time, and I kind of learned kind of all aspects of filmmaking, not really well, but I kind of learned how to run a camera and how to deal with lights and things like that. And then I started making my own short films, which were not necessarily any better than the short films my friends were making. And now I'm working on mainly feature films, so that's exciting.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you, Bry. We have one more panelist. Yeah, darn right. Let's go ahead. Thank you for your time, everybody. And we have one more panelist that will be arriving shortly, so we'll continue the program. And when she gets here, we'll have her introduce. We'll put her through the gauntlet. I'll introduce her. She's walking down. My name is Jason Connelly, and I was born and raised in Ballard, so just in the Northern Territory of Washington, in the community of Seattle. Classically trained stage actor, so I went to Cornish College of the Arts and received my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in acting. And so in front of the camera has been the driver of a lot of my passion. Over the years, that's evolved. I have stepped into, I'm now executive and executive producer on the same film called They Reach, as well as casting and the production acting coach. And recently started co-directing more and more projects, little teeny projects along the way to kind of satisfy that appetite that I have for telling stories on film, because that's what I want to do. I love telling stories on film. And with Seattle being not necessarily the biggest union town, it's tricky for me for which projects I can do, being a member of the Guild, Screen Actors Guild. So when I do get those opportunities, it's really a lot of fun for me to be able to do that. The film that really did it for me, and I can remember it well, 1977, Star Wars. Changed my life. But here's what the interesting fact is that I wanted to do what Dennis Muir and Phil Tippett did, the special effects gurus and those men and women that eventually went on to make a company called Industrial Light and Magic. So I wanted to do special effects because I always built model airplanes and stuff like that as a kid. I figured my talent I wasn't really prepared or have the patience to be able to do something. So that's where I started shifting to wanting to maybe I can be in front of the camera. And that's where my path started for me. But it was Star Wars that definitely changed my life with respect of telling stories and taking people to far off and marvelous places a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So very excited about that. So, alrighty. Here we go. Let's get started here. So how this is going to work, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get your input is Heather's going to scribe for us. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask a few of you out there is what do you hope to get out of our time together? This is really, really a special time, and I really thank you and appreciate all of you for coming out here and giving us your time to have a nice discussion. You know, it's a two-way street, two-way conversation. So let me ask you this. What is something you would like to get out of our time together today? Throw something out. Yeah, front row.
I would really like to know the difference in kind of the sub-roles of executive producer, associate producer.
Okay, so the different roles of a producer or the different jobs of a producer. Okay, great. Yes, sir. Back.
I was just going to say, similar to her, in the name of the program, because I'm interested in film, I do film, and as those people come to me and they're like, what is a producer?
Okay. So clearer definition of what a producer is on that one. Okay, let's start by that. Any others? Yeah, hi.
How, I guess, the roles change between like a feature or a short film, because I know it's just more.
Yeah, right.
That's a great question.
That is a great, Heather just said, if you couldn't hear it, she said that's a great question. The lower the budget, the many hats that one wears, on that. Great. Wonderful. Yes, hi.
How I could be a better producer for teens films
Be a better producer, particularly for teen films.
or any low budget films that.
Okay.
Because I've been doing a couple of different ones. Just
Okay. Okay. Great. Did I see a? Oh, yes, hi.
Hi. How do you go about finding a producer?
How do you go about finding a producer? Well, I have my card. That's one way.
Thank you.
But it's very true, right? Networking opportunities like this are great, right? So we can build our community, right? We can take what we do in this room and we can expand it. If there's someone's work that you like, or like one of us, you kind of like the vibe, reach out to us. Get our phone number before you go. Get our email alias before you go. We can have these conversations on that. So that's one way to do it. You don't know until you ask, right? On that one. Questions others in the back.
What are the resources for producers here locally?
Okay, resources for producers. So when you say that, can you be more specific as far as when you say producer resources? You're meaning not just finding a producer, but resources that are available to aid once you have a producer role?
Right,
Okay.
right. So, where are you going to find your talent, and what if you need equipment, and things like that?
Yeah, the $1 million question. Yes.
This is a tricky question. I'm not sure how to ask it.
Okay, we'll help you.
So how much currency does the idea for a film have, or
Okay.
a project? So that, in fact, if you have a really good idea,
Right.
and it's an idea that's not been done, it's not been covered, it's an
Right.
area, that itself will drive the relationship with the producer, that the producer then understands it can be monetized and can be made into something real,
Okay.
where you're not coming maybe with the financial capital,
Right.
but you have maybe access to the individuals that are necessary for the story to be told.
Okay.
You have the idea, you own something that the idea is powerful.
Owning the idea. How could we summarize that, guys? How powerful is the idea? How powerful is the idea? Does that have the
How do you
same?
how do you value the strength of your idea?
Okay.
So, because you're going to be negotiating immediately with that idea to bring
Sure.
it into the world. You're going to be
Sure.
bringing people in. Are they coming in on a spec with you? Are
Mhm.
they taking, the ride on this, that they're going to get this funded? Or are they expecting you to fund it?
Uh-huh.
Where does that all play out?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm appreciating exactly the spirit behind your question. So maybe let's go ahead. What did you write down there, Heather?
How powerful, or how do you put value on it?
Value. Let's add maybe some dollar signs to that. Right. I think that's fair to say. Right. Cost money. Okay. Great. Yes, Sam. Sorry. Oh, there's two Sams. Sorry. And you guys are sitting like that.
A good producer versus a
How do you know a good producer from a bad producer? How do you know? Well, we're the good producers. So that's a start. That's a great question. What are some traits of the good? Well, they're good looking like me. And everyone on this panel. Okay. How do you know? What are some traits of a good producer? And have we worked with a bad producer? I guess would be, I'm just. Oh, Sabrina. No. I'm sorry. I'm pointing to. Sorry, Sabrina.
How does the producer get the money?
How does producer get funding? Great.
I want to know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I know. We were just kind of. Brian and I are going, hey, we need some post-production funding. We're working on that very thing right now. Sir, yes.
How to become one?
How to become a producer. How to become a producer. And let's go ahead and take one more because we are filling up that board. And one more. Yes, ma'am.
How do you take a film that has been or is being made
Okay.
and put it out there? How do you?
Distribution. Yeah, Bryce, we just came back from American Film Market, so Yeah, we have that. Do we have room for two more? I saw two more hands. Let's go two more. We have two more. I saw two more hands. Yes, Frida.
If we have time, when do you want to pursue your film being SAG or not?
When does your production want to become SAG stands for the Screen Actors Guild, or would be a union shoot, at least from an actress perspective. So when do you want to pursue? Anytime you want to hire me, which is always. Great. And I saw one more back here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, putting together a budget for a project that you may not be familiar with, the genre or the size, the length of the project.
Okay, so specifically, how do you draw the financial roadmap for budgetary needs of something?
Let's say you're making a feature for the first time. What's the best way to budget for that?
Oh, okay. Okay. Budgeting for. Did you get that already?
Yeah, right here.
Oh. Oh, okay. Well, there we are, being very succinct. Okay. All right. So, wow. There we are. We have our work cut out for us. Let's go ahead and get started. And let's start addressing these questions. And one of the things that I like to do is to help us get warmed out is I'm going to name a producer role. So this will tick off a couple of those. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say a producer role out loud. And then I want you to kind of yell at us an answer of what you think that role does. Then I will read the definition, the dictionary definition of that role, and then what we will do is one of our experienced panelists will give you a real world example. Does that sound like a good plan? So maybe along the way on this rabbit hole, we'll be able to also hit more of those. All right, let's do this. All right, so here's the first one here. What is executive producer? Executive producer. Money. We don't have much room to write these down, do we? I didn't think about that.
I can erase these and start again if someone has written them down. Just take a picture of
Yeah,
them.
I was just
Take pictures.
Good thinking. I like that. You got that? Thank you so much. All right. So executive producer, money. That's great. Thank you. Communal learning. While Heather's doing that, actually, one of the things, if you can be as specific as you can for the needs that you have, people are more than welcome to help you. One of the things that terrifies me, this is a true story, one of the things that absolutely I have no problem speaking in front of people. I have no problem speaking in front of a camera. I am terrified, that's not an exaggeration, I am terrified of writing in front of people. I'm absolutely terrified. So because I made that known, I reached out to somebody and said, hey, I need some help. Heather, do you mind scribing in front of a group of people? Are you okay with writing in front of either hand? Because I'm always afraid about my handwriting or punctuation or spelling or something like that.
My handwriting's crappy, but I don't mind.
But you don't mind. So what I'm trying to instill in you is just because you hate it or loathe it doesn't mean somebody else does. So my wish for you is whenever you're working on a production, don't assume that because you don't like it, because isn't it possible that somebody might love the very thing that you loathe? And that's where you can find some great teamwork. And so this was a wonderful gift for me because now I don't have to stress out about it. Oh my God, am I spelling this right? Am I doing this right? Because Heather's up there and she's running the show. So that's actually a very valuable lesson because as a producer, one of the things you want to do is just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, right? We need to have designation, separation, segregation of duties, and you need to stick to those so you can do them as best you can. Ultra low budget features, I understand. You wear many hats. I get that. But you want to try to stick to your discipline as best you can so you can do the best job that you can, right? And if you need to make trade-offs, at least you understand where and why you are making those trade-offs on that. So a little side chat there. Okay, so executive producer. What the heck is an executive producer? I heard money. Money, money, money. What else do we have? What else is an executive producer?
Come to set and take selfies.
Come to set and take selfies. That was directed at me. That was directed at me. I do take a lot because I'm proud of the work that we're doing and everyone that's taking their time and I want to document it. So that's very true. I did take a lot of selfies on set. Or I'd walk through the frame when they were filming because I wasn't paying attention to the director on that one. So, oh, great. This is going to be the longest 10-second walk, Lacey, you've had in your entire life. Dun, dun, dun. Hi, welcome. You're right here next to me. I'll take good care of you, right at the hot seat.
Quite concerned. Hi.
So here's what we're doing. So actually, what I'm going to have you do is introduce yourself.
Okay.
Okay. And go ahead and say your name, current or recent project, your job on that project, and what motion picture did it for you that says, you know what, I want to be in filmmaking to some degree.
Okay. First one's easy. I'm Lacey Leavitt. Got that one. I produced 2 feature films recently, both available in certain venues. We shot them both in Everett and Granite Falls last year. One's called Sadie. It just dropped on iTunes and Amazon and now Vudu last Friday. Yay. By Megan Griffiths. We were just here at a run in Olympia a couple of weeks ago where I said, yes, I would do this. And then right before that, also produced Lynn Shelton's Outside In, which is currently on Netflix.
Nice.
Yay, film. And I guess for me, specifically saying, I think it's Jaws, honestly, that got me into it. Maybe it was the absolute terror that made me look nowhere else. But I've always been involved in storytelling. My dad is an English teacher and got me into that very early on. And at a certain point, I realized, wait, people write movies, people make movies. This is a thing I need to look into, because before that, I kind of only understood about books.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you. God, Jaws, I think I mentioned this on the last panel, would Jaws be as successful today if it was released as it was in 1978? And I don't know, 77? You think it would be? You think so? I mean, you don't see the damn fish until the end of the picture on Jaws. Do you think the audiences today would, I mean, they're so trained to see a climax every 2-3 minutes. I mean, I would like to believe in my heart, because I love Jaws, that they would do that.
I don't think it would. I think if it were made today, frankly, even by Spielberg, but of course he was young at the time, so who knows? But I don't think Jaws would have been made the same. Yeah, like the Meg is what they make now. Yeah, which I mean, not everyone would make the Meg, but you know, they make the Meg.
Yeah, they would make the Meg. I haven't seen the Meg yet, but I'm anxious.
Frankly, me neither.
On that one, great, thank you. So what we're doing right now is we gathered from the audience what kind of things they would like to see out of the class. Jay has it on his phone there. And what we're doing here is we're simply going down the list. So I just shouted out, we're in the process of doing that right now, is I'm shouting out a role, a producer, one of the producer jobs, and we're taking mind share from the audience of what they think that is. I'm going to then read the dictionary definition of what that role is, and then one of us will add a real-life example and see how they line up on that one, okay? So, executive producer, we talked about money. Selfies on set, we won't write that one. He was talking to me because I took a lot of selfies because I like to document the films. Other one, yes, sir.
I would think that there's kind of 2 stories happening. One is the story of the film itself.
Right.
Then there's a story about the entire film. How does it get out? What is it? How does it get funded? Are we shooting it on iPhones? Are we what technology? What's the novelty factor to how we're doing it?
Right.
Is that the role of the executive producer, is who possesses the story in their head of the entire thing as one story itself? What it is.
So what it is, like what is the desired output for the entire tone for the project?
Somebody, I think all stories are imagined. So somebody is imagining the whole thing.
Right.
Like, what does it mean to make this film?
Okay.
It's kind of McLuhan. The medium itself. What is that message? What is really happening with all that this, intends to be?
Okay.
And that would be the person who kind of keeps that vision. What I'm saying behind me, that vision keeps it to that story.
Right.
Because it very easily can go off in 6 directions.
Okay.
Somebody else thinks this. The director thinks this.
Sure.
Or is that the director's role, and the executive producer just getting the money?
Segregation of duties when it comes to the pre-production process. What did you write down for vision? Just overall vision on that one?
Because when the executive producer say, we need that director.
Oh, so the executive producer can very well be in that position to be able to hire the director.
And choose the director.
Hire the director.
It would also depend on what medium you're in.
Medium, so tell me more.
In other words, if you're TV, the producer's usually in charge.
Yep, that's right. Actually, that's a great point.
And it happens in film also, but there are so many areas in film where it's the director has the charge.
Right.
And then it depends, once again, is it local or is it big
Sure.
movie or something? And
So-
it could be a family friend as an executive producer also.
So and this is exactly why we're asking this question, right? And we'll go down to the dictionary definition of that, and then personal experience. But to the point, though, is that's actually a nice nuance that was just mentioned of who's the boss on the film set. Could say the director, right? Makes the final call. Television, a little different. You have the producers in the background that can tell the director, no, I think we need to shoot that one again, or I don't think that's quite right. The hierarchy is slightly different in that. We can talk to those nuances when we get to those, but that's a great distinction to make between motion picture and television, for example, on that. Other thoughts on what a executive producer is or does or should be? Yeah. Hiring. Okay. Okay. No. Hiring. Okay. Okay. Ayla. Yeah.
I guess along the lines of hiring, like casting.
Okay. Could be along the lines of casting. So when they reach, I executive producer, but it was also part of casting on that one. That was my task on that one. So, good. Okay. You guys want to hear the dictionary definition? The role of the executive producer is to oversee the work of the producer, which we'll get to in a moment, on behalf of the studio, the financiers, or the distributors. They will ensure that the film is completed on time, within budget, and to the agreed aesthetic and technical standards. And it's very interesting today because we're in an exciting shift right now because you just don't, motion pictures just aren't seen in the movie house anymore, just aren't seen in the cinema anymore or television. Now we have streaming, we have video on demand or VOD, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and other avenues like that. So the audience and the way they consume our I'll use the term product, consume the product has changed. Whether it's on the big team or, God forbid, they're watching Sadie on this. I'm so sorry if people do that.
I mean, if they paid for it, I'm okay with it at this point.
Okay, there you go. That's right. Eyeballs get the finances going. So that is the dictionary definition. So who on this panel has been an executive producer who would like to comment on what was said by the audience, and how well does that match up in your experience with stuff like that? Short film? Sure. Short film, long film, any film. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I guess, technically executive producer on a short film that I wrote and directed because I put up all the money for it.
Okay.
I designed a crowdfunding campaign and raised the money, and
okay.
Which is very different than being an executive producer on a big budget or a feature film. But it does give you a lot of creative control if you're the person that has the dollars. You do have some impact on who will be on your crew and who will be in the cast. So that was a lot of fun to play all those roles for a short film.
Okay. Bry, how about you? What do you think?
Oh, you need my opinion on that?
Yeah, just your opinion on that.
I agree.
There we go. He agrees.
I haven't been an executive producer, but I've been a producer. But I've watched an executive producer on a recent feature that I was on, who is in a blue shirt right over there, and he was pretty amazing.
Oh.
Yeah. I'd say that the dictionary definition might apply, it might not apply.
Sure.
It depends on what film you're working on. Yeah. So a lot of the definitions that you find on Google or in dictionaries, they're kind of correct, but might not always be correct in film.
May not always fit the situation, which is why this is an important topic that we thought would be an interesting panel choice, because sometimes you got to wear many hats, and you have a perspective
and a hat
on that one, and a beautiful hat
Thank
too.
you.
I like that.
Got it in Dollywood.
Dollywood.
Yeah.
I saw your picture. You and Megan were in Dollywood.
Oh,
were
yeah.
you not?
Oh, did you see a picture?
I
Did we
did.
post a picture from Dollywood? We posted so many pictures from Dollywood.
I hear the food in Dollywood's really good, actually.
The cinnamon bread was incredible. It was great.
So Christmassy.
Just still glowing from the spirit of Dolly. Yeah, I've been executive producer, but actually only on, as you mentioned, or can't remember who mentioned it. I think television programs. So I've done a couple of short pieces for Adult Swim, and I had an executive producer credit on that. Actually, although I also, so in that context, I can say it depends. So I've done a couple things for Adult Swim. One is an unaired pilot. One is an aired short. They were both weird because it's Adult Swim. And I can say that's very true from the dictionary definition. In terms of television, it can be the executive producers in that case were the studio folks as well as the creators of the show. And of course, TV is a slightly different jazz, but we can talk about that if we want to. I also executive produced a web series called Automata, which is, yay, Automata, which you can now watch for free on YouTube, thanks to Gunpowder and Sky. They have a cool little, that's a really great new distributor, and they were doing all sorts of cool stuff, including they have a sci-fi channel called Dust, which is both an online presence. They also just put out the other amazing local film, Prospect. I can't even call that just an amazing local film. It's just an amazing film. Highly recommend. I think it's still in theaters right now. So on that, I did have executive producer credit, and it was a web series, but we really did the production as if it were a film, just knowing that it would eventually be serialized in some way. And that was a really accurate description. I did kind of have it was a pretty small project. I eventually brought on my producing partner, Jonathan Queso. I've worked with a lot. So he has producer credit in that one. I have executive producer credit. And on that one, I teamed up with the writer-director, I think 2 years before I made it. So yeah, I had, we worked really closely together, but I had a lot of control in that project. And then as far as on the films I've produced or co-produced, it really depends. And that definition works if you're talking about, money coming from larger production company sources or financing company sources, which I've done. I'd also say, just to slightly amend it for independent film, sometimes the executive producer is not representing the financiers. They actually are the financiers.
Right.
And that's certainly been the case. And then who has the control? That's just something that we build into the contracts. So I think to have an executive producer who knows what they're doing can sometimes be a really amazing thing to have an executive producer on your film who does have some control, because you want somebody who's experienced steering the ship. That said, if you have an executive producer who's really well-intentioned but only has money, not experience, they might make some decisions along the way that wouldn't be the best for the overall film. Right. It just really comes down to contracts. Okay. So, I'd say that's, as we sort of move forward describing all of the producing positions, since there are so many overlaps, having contracts and everyone knowing like what their lanes are and are not are just really important.
For sure. Here's my card, by the way. Great. Thank you.
Producing right now on stage.
Never pass up a networking opportunity, and all you filmmakers out there should have business cards, and if you don't, shame on you, because I would love to have it. Okay, no, thank you for that. So I was executive producer on They Reach, but the role is a little different. The need was a little different. I was not the sole financier. I wasn't the sole money person on the film, but what I did do is I can lean into is I'm a builder and I'm a connector. So when the director approached me and said, hey, I have this story for They Reach. It just came from Bleedingham. It took 3rd place. I think there's an appetite for this story. I said, I agree with you. I think there is an appetite for the story. Now we need some talented people to do it. And we need to start building what we call the film family. And it's really the genesis and the creation of that film family that's going to put you through the finish line. And the very, very first person we talked to is that man, that wonderful man down there, Bry Troyer. And that's a true story. Bry was, that's one of the things. Where your shoulders are the broadest, but I also know where my shoulders aren't as broad, where we need somebody, where we need some talent that's beyond my scope. And so being able to identify that. So as an executive producer, it was really about talent gathering, talent building to be able to get and it was beyond more than just the financial need. Now, we were an ultra low budget film. Ultra low budget has the standard of $250,000 or less. Our film looks like it was made for $10 million, but it was under $250,000. It's great producing, and it's a team, right? It's a team on that one. I saw a couple hands. I don't want to get too far. Yes, sir.
I think I'm getting confused right now.
Sure.
Between producer and executive.
Yes.
I don't know where we are.
Yeah. So we are, because we're crossing lines right now. So.
What's a producer? Maybe we can go there and then go back to executive producer.
Right.
I don't know who's hiring who at this point.
So at this point, you could look at it as the person who generated, at least in the They Reach example, and I don't like to use the word hire, but I was on there first. Silas Dahl, who's the director, had the story idea. He came to me and I said, wow, I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. I think this is fantastic. He handed me the script. It needed work. I know just the person to help make the screenplay stronger and tighter. That's where we brought in Bry Troyer as first kind of as a script doctor to come in, and then he later became the producer. And the producer's role, we're going to get into that definition specifically at the next one, right? So I understand your confusion, because when we get into ultra low budget films, we do wear many hats. And so forgive me, this is actually very tricky for us to navigate this path. So help me keep honest. So I want to make sure we're answering your question, okay, on that? All right. But we were going to hit the producer we're going to do the same thing for the producer role, and that will hopefully drive some clarity to that. Another question hand was up over here.
I could probably add a little input onto that.
Yeah, go for it, Bry.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
I think on They Reach, it is ultra low budget, so small budget indies often have a different setup than the larger budget movies. But on ours, I think the producer is kind of like the manager of the store in a way. So the producer makes sure that we have, a really good crew, and we've hired a good crew, and we have a good cast. Jason was kind of in charge of working with the cast, and we had somebody else that worked as a co-casting director, I guess, at first. Mm-hmm. Jason was the casting director as well, so he wore another hat. But really, I think as a producer, I was kind of the manager of the store in a way, and Jason was kind of like the director of the store, maybe, if that makes sense.
I'm the one who came on set and took selfies. No.
So there's a lot of overlap between executive producer and a producer. Yeah.
So manager is an interesting idea.
Right. Yeah.
You're managing a process, but you're not really since we're not in a studio system where you've been hired by the studio to be executive producer and represent their interests.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Maybe not even the person it was ever pitched to. Right? It was pitched to somebody, then you're hired to say, this is what we do want, make sure it does happen the way we want it to happen.
Right. Right.
And then the producer becomes a manager of the entire process.
They're the one who gets things done. They oversee. They're kind of like the general manager that will hire the talent that's needed and participate. So in our situation, we had the triad. We had myself, we had Bry Troyer, and then we had Silas Dahl. Then we all looked at all the roles that we needed to film to be able to tell our story successfully and what the cutoff was. So we had to make those hard decisions, right? And part of that was, how do we start to acquire talent? And that's what I do very, very well. Bry is great with story, so that's why he was originally brought in. And then he's obviously a tremendous line producer that keeps us on track, keeps us on budget, and make sure we ensure that we're hitting our days, hitting our budgets, right? Just like managing a store.
Yeah, he just mentioned another producer title there. He snuck that in, line producer.
Yeah, I'm getting on
That's
that.
probably
I'm
the easiest
doing
one to define out of all of them, actually.
Teaser for the line producer. Is that next? Yeah, actually, we can go to line producer next. Absolutely. Okay, any further questions before we move on here? Does that kind of give you a better idea? We will have a source sheet that we'll hand out at the end of this, by the way, so we'll have some helpful web links for you too as well on that. But you can also kind of see where, depending on the size of the production, and as Lacey alluded to, those lines can get kind of blurry. So I understand the confusion. So hopefully...
Yeah, we'll further confuse you, don't worry.
Yeah, we'll further
confuse you. As we go through the positions, we'll just
hopefully
further
that
confuse
helped out
you.
a little bit. So any other follow-up? See, we already lost one. Any other questions before we go? Oh, it's erased. Okay, line producer. Let's go into that. What is a line producer? Big question mark from the audience. Oh, Sam.
Someone who actually manages the set.
Someone who actually manages the set. Okay. So someone who actually manages the set.
Or the producer that's on set in the current.
Okay. And, yeah.
Don't they handle the below the line, all the below the line producing?
Okay, what would be below the line?
Like not the talent, not the director, but they, like you said, the set,
Okay.
the budget for all that stuff.
Okay. Okay. So when it comes to the facility, equipment, execution of
and
the particular filming day?
The sets, the on location
Okay.
stuff.
Okay. Okay. Next, yeah. Line producer. Anybody else? It's a hard one. Yeah.
I would say that line producer is like both for the director, because otherwise the director will be like asking a lot of questions.
Right.
We'll be handling a lot of stuff that is not non-technical stuff. So it's like he's a buffer. So he or she allows the director to do its job.
So they're a buffer to allow the director to focus on and this is an important point, to allow the director to focus on the creative, because the director is responsible for everything that is seen and heard on the screen. So we need to be able to, since it's usually only one man or one woman, sometimes there's a we need to be able to relieve them of duties that doesn't require them to necessarily do, so they can focus on the specific things that we want them to focus on, right? And sometimes housekeeping, running the store is one of those things. Okay, great. I saw another hand up over here. I could be seeing things too.
It was me, but he said it better.
He said it better. Great. Yeah.
Is there a word used in filmmaking called the line?
Yes.
There is.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really, because she used it there saying below the line. I think
Oh.
that's fascinating.
Yeah. So we can talk about, the line, the assembly, the manufacturing. And then I saw a hand up over here. Line producer. What do you think? Oh, okay. You're just stretching.
I always think the line producer is the person who creates the budget and maintains it.
Okay.
Keeps you on track.
Okay. Budget.
What's the actual definition?
Here is the definition. Here's what the dictionary. The line producer is really a job rather than a title. This person who is directly responsible for many of the day-to-day burdens of the production, such as budgets, unions, and other business, will often have another title, such as co-producer or executive producer.
Or even co-executive producer
or even
at times.
co-executive producer. Right. Well, and so, right?
Basically, none of this applies.
Yeah, do you want to try something?
You want the mic?
No, I mean,
Oh.
I just want to make sure we put the actual definition, so people don't get confused.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned budget. I think that probably got
So budget
closer.
was on there, dealing with unions. So I dealt with the Screen Actors Guild on our production. Bry drove that, but it got to a point where we both needed to work on it, right, to relieve our director from having to do that, right, remove those obstacles so the production can move forward.
But
on
those
that
all
one.
had to do with the budget, and that's kind of, I think, now I don't know, but I've been told.
Yep.
It's one of those. I don't know if this is something I should say after prefacing it with that, but line refers to a ledger line. Have you guys heard of that on a budget? And so really a line producer does keep track of the budget. So when I was the line producer on They Reach, and so when Silas would come to me, he would say, so we'd like to do this big blood thing but we need to run out and buy a bunch of stuff, and I was the guy there to say no. We can't do that.
Or a lot of times you said yes.
That's true.
I feel like the line producer, in a way, knows what is happening all the time because they see where a project is working or where it's hemorrhaging funds or where the log jams are, because they're working with the numbers, they're working with the contracts, they're working with sort of like the client, the personnel. And so they, in a way, even though it's kind of like a bean counter, but they're also kind of the one running the show sometimes. And I've worked on 2 different features where the line producer has kind of stepped into a stronger leadership role than just sort of like, oh, well, you're just kind of in charge of this. Like one was the executive producers were young and they had a lot of money, but they didn't know what to do with it. And the line producer essentially just had to corral them the whole production. And so it's kind of one of those roles where, mom or dad sort of takes over, and they're the ones who are like you said, no, you can't do that. Put that away, So at least that's my experience with the line producers who I've worked with.
It's important to have parameters, I think, It's important to be able to be familiar with the budget where you're hemorrhaging money, like you're spending too much on latex, or maybe there's one division that is spending more money than they should, because that could usually mean that there's a problem there. Everything kind of comes down to contracts. In those contracts, you're hiring for a specific function to be performed, usually within a specific time frame. And if you start to exceed that, then you can run into more problems. So having somebody that can oversee the structure, the flow, understanding where the hemorrhaging is, or maybe one group is able to achieve something more economically than another group, because then you can start moving funds around. But having a clear picture of where your financial footing is all the time is a gift, and I look at it as an enabling process. Yes, sir.
Would it be related to like a line item?
Line producer, line item, ledger line.
Yeah. That's probably where the etymology of the word comes from. That'd be my guess.
Ooh, etymology.
Yeah, right. But that must be in the dictionary, right? I want this film dictionary. I've been in and I thought it was nice actually in that definition too that it said that line producer is a role, not always a title. Yeah. I've made films where I've been the line. Yes, I'm lucky enough now that I've actually made a couple of films where I'm not the line producer, which because I started. Even on my first producer credit, I was actually also line producing, and it was, I have to say, over my career, it's been hard to get rid of that piece because giving up that control of like knowing all of the things was actually for me in my journey like something I had to really let go of, so I could do more focusing on the creative producing and the working with the director, because you really truly you can't do both at 100%. So that's why you have to have producing partners. And you have to have somebody should be in charge of for me and from my experience, I feel like it's really important for someone to be more the line producer and someone to be more the director, creative producer. Hopefully you have a good team, enough roles, enough budget that you can fulfill those things. If not budget, then at least team. Because sometimes we come for free where we pay to be there ourselves. But I was really fortunate. One of my first producing mentors was Jennifer Roth, who is one of the best line producers in the business, in the indie business. She's been working for, I don't know how many years, but you can look at our IMDb. And she has had everything from line producer to co-producer to co-executive producer to now executive producer credit on a lot of different, and actually even I think now producer credit. And she put it into really good clarity for me one time. She said that it's my job as line producer, it's my job to make sure that the director has everything they need, that I take all of the resources of the film and I make sure that the director can put all of that possible on the screen. And that means you do have to be really, really cognizant of crew, of unions, of, okay, what do I owe these things? Because if you are not an experienced line producer, if you're unaware, if you're not paying attention to the contracts, if you're not paying attention to the unions, and you find out, your second week of shooting, I didn't realize how much overtime we were doing, and now we have $50,000 less than I thought. Now we can't have the cool flamethrowers on the last day of shooting, which is supposed to be our climax. Whatever that is. So although it does seem like on the surface, it can seem like a boring number crunchy job, but you're so vital. I think you were saying this too, like you're so vital to the director's vision, because someone really does have to be paying attention. Unless you just have, for some reason, unlimited money. It doesn't matter how much you spend. I have yet to work on one of those films. But yeah, that's how I've seen it.
Yes.
Where does the lawyer come in, and who's the one who seeks out a lawyer? Because you're having to deal with unions and contracts and hiring people, and now you have a couple of producers who are all sharing pieces of the pie that are above the line. So where's the lawyer come in, and how long are they there with you throughout the process?
I can answer that question. So I would go ahead. I found the lawyer that we ended up using for They Reach. We actually had two of them. Bry had brought in somebody that he had known to start part of the contract process as far as how do we protect ourselves as a production. So forming the LLC and the mechanisms around that, because if there is something that goes wrong, we need to limit so it doesn't come after us directly, but the production, and to protect the production. The other one was dealing with contracts. We're actually, the lawyer for us is there is a lawyer entity kind of all the way through the process, not to the point where they're on their retainer, but to the point of, hey, here's some contracts that we would like to have people sign for a non-disclosure agreement. Does this look okay? Here's some contracts that we would like to have people, if they are on the set, that we have the rights to use their image and so forth like that. Now that we're in
she almost came to this. I expected to see her here. Yeah, I was just talking to her on the phone right before I came here. Yeah. Katrina Brady. She's amazing.
Finding a good lawyer, and where I found Katrina was Women in Film. There's another wonderful networking event called Women in Film that I highly encourage everyone to attend a function, because I have met more talented people there and feel inspired, and that's where I met this attorney. We started off as friends, and then I didn't want to abuse the friendship, so obviously we need to start compensating her for her expertise. And so to answer your question is stem to stern. There's an attorney a touch point attorney. So make a contact with attorney so I can recommend her. I have her give you her information. And it's very helpful for those situations. But you're right. We need to have that all the way through. Now, particularly now that we're in post-production and we've come back from the American film market and there's some heavy interest there, now we're really going to need some contracts because we're going to start having contracts come to us. It's one thing to be the originator of the contracts, but now having contracts come to us and interpret exactly what does that mean as far as liability, as far as what we're giving up in equity and stuff like that. Answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's a good question. Yeah.
To piggyback on that question, how do you gauge the lawyer?
Sure.
In terms of how much they know.
Yep.
You know, can
Great
they
question.
handle this, especially where we live. You know, I'm
Yep.
sure in LA,
Yep.
all of them can do it.
Great question.
They do.
You have to meet them.
Want an LA lawyer?
I wouldn't even bet all of them can do it down there.
Yeah. you have to you have to sit down and meet with them. So the attorney that we started off with was fantastic. Of what she started, we met with her. You know, we told her where our needs are, and she got us going. But the relationship, it's kind of like a feel. You know, what have you worked on? What are similar films of the under 250,000 projects have you done contracts for? Have you done a major motion picture before? What kind of things in the entertainment business? So it's kind of like a job interview in a way.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I think it also really helps to talk to people who have done it before,
Right.
get referrals, because people who have been making movies in this area will know who the good folks are and who you should avoid. I mean, I would say don't just go blind and try to do this on your own. I would get recommendations from other folks.
Like I have a recommendation. Yeah. So, but then you do need to meet with them, and you need to see if are you compatible with each other too. You know what I mean?
And if you can afford them.
And if you can afford them, they come with different billing rates depending on, and some of them will be passionate about filmmaking, and they may cut you a deal. They can, because you're being open and honest about where your footing is financially. They might say, hey, well, just put my company name in your credits, or I don't know. I mean, you know, there's always room.
Give them associate producer.
Give them associate. Here's the number one rule, guys. Everything's negotiable. Everything's negotiable. Just have the courage to ask.
Just don't ask your public defender to do it.
Just don't ask your public defender. Great. Any other questions with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a lawyer too.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole field is changing so rapidly, the law.
Yeah.
About intellectual ownership and copyright. I mean, it's really in flux.
Right.
And all these new productions that are being done with this new kind of democratic model.
Right.
Well, who's really responsible and not? And who really owns, and where's the leadership? And what's going to happen with #MeToo, you know, #MeToo, and all these things that are going on? It's very litigious environment to be operating
Right.
in. So I would
Right.
think a lawyer would have to be somebody who's really keeping up on what is current, not somebody just who worked on films 3 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the interview process. It's like when you go to your doctor. You want to make sure that they're reading the latest medical journals. It's the same thing with the attorney. Video on demand has changed the landscape, right? Amazon, Netflix. I mean, there's now studios, for gosh sakes. You know, the way people consume content, and are you stepping on somebody's something somewhere, like what I mean by intellectual property? That's a slippery slope, right? Anything to add to this before we move on from this wonderful? Yes.
And a quick question about
Yeah.
the lawyers. So, what level of production? When do you, like, if you're just doing like a short film for like $1,000?
Right.
No lawyer, probably.
Right.
So, like, when do you think?
Well,
this
you
is
would hope you wouldn't need a lawyer for that.
Right.
So when do you bring the lawyer in? When do you realize that this is a production
Sure.
that needs a lawyer to consult with for the contract?
Well, some would say for all projects. Some could also say is, you know, that's the same thing as how do you know when you need to buy production insurance? I mean, the true answer should be for all of it, right? Because if somebody tips over a C-stand and it conks someone on the ankle, that would be for a bad day. Maybe a guiding point might be to look at it as, do I want to monetize this project someday? And if you want to monetize the project, that could be a good indicator going, yeah, probably would get a lawyer in place so I can secure those assets that I need. Anybody else want to expand on that?
I would, because I've done short films as well, where I've not had a lawyer, you know, work with me on that because, you know, it was, you know, $5,000 or less and whatever. you can find, and if you're ever going to be working with people before you bring in a lawyer, like let's say the very, very earliest, drafts of people writing a script together or whatever, I would just say that make sure that everyone's on the same page about what their expectations are, should the best and the worst case scenario happen, and then create documents. You can find documents online to use for template, contract templates. If it's going to be, short film, you can find crew deal memos online. I would always get production insurance no matter what. And even if you can't afford it on that particular production, find a production company that's willing to let you have the production insurance, unless you own your own cameras and it's all your family in your house. That's where like the legalese in me is like, don't ever do it without insurance. In case the worst case scenario happens. But I have done it without a lawyer before. Not that I think I should be saying this on anything that's being recorded, but for short films, if you have contracts, if you feel like if you or your producing partner or somebody on the team can actually read all of the union contracts and feel like, you're not going to get yourselves into trouble, then, if it's going to be for such low stakes where you're likely not making any money, where it's for a short film, that's a time where I would personally take the risk of moving forward without a lawyer. But I can't tell you what to do because I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the level of risk if you hope to monetize it? Having contracts in place is always a great idea. Getting it from the NOLO site or something, just so you're all on the same page. Because what happens when you get to that fork in the road? Which way do you go? Right. It just kind of helps. Just drives clarity to the discussion. And if you do it soon enough, then you'll have those discussion points and alter the contracts at that point in time, not when you're in the middle of filming, kind of filming day. Bry.
I was just going to say there's some paper up here.
We'll be handing these out at the
sheets
end.
that tell you about where to get insurance, forms that you can find online. No Film School has 99 forms that people use in film. So they're right there. So after the session's over, feel free to grab one of those pieces of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to look at it now. So the treats. Yes.
What's your opinion on you say, make sure everybody's on the same page?
Yeah.
Working with lower budget things, people are going to have to donate a lot of time and energy.
Yep.
And they're going to want a bigger part of the pie. What's your idea about points and how to allocate those things in a fair way, if at all?
Sure. No, those are great questions. So we're level setting the idea of points. Maybe you've heard that that description used before. Basically, what it is it's a fractional share of the production of the film itself. Points. So you'll give somebody in trade. This is one possibility. Is you give someone trade for if the film should ever be monetized and sold, that a point will have a monetary value. And the idea is that if the production makes money, then everybody gets money to some degree. Because a lot of these are passion projects. A lot of these people are deferred pay. A lot of these are no pay. Being very clear of exactly where you are when you have discussions with folks and what they hope to get out of it. Sometimes people just want something kick-ass for their reel. Sometimes understand what's the value for them. Make sure you understand what their needs are, because that makes that discussion go a lot smoother on that one. We are in the process right now of kind of looking at a point structure as things becomes, because we want to be able to, hey, a lot of people helped us out, and we want to make sure that we're doing right, because we want to be known as the good guys that did right by everybody. You invested in us, you took a chance on us, and gosh darn it, we're going to make sure that we can, pay back in this case in some fashion, other than just a great film for your resume and IMDb and stuff like that. So being very clear on what that monetary system is, because it may not always be money. Does that make sense?
Is there any insurance to protection that somebody later can't come back and say, I wrote a short story 4 years ago and you stole that idea? Can you protect yourself with title insurance?
That's errors and omission insurance. You pretty much have to get it if you want to monetize your movie. In fact, we are looking into getting errors and omission insurance right now for They Reach. So that's what that is.
You have to make that case to the insurer that you've done due diligence, and as far as you know, there's nobody's done this exact way. And
exactly. When you fill out your E&O application, you say, you check off the boxes, and that'll depend. So if you say we already did a title search for this, we did a clearance search on the title, on the everything, then your insurance will be lower. If you didn't do those due diligence steps, then your insurance will cost more. You can't, insure against somebody coming, being crazy and wanting to take you to court, but the E&O will pay for that if, you're found to be in the clear. That said, if you did steal someone's, not that you ever would, but if you did, your E&O insurance isn't going to cover that. If you actually did plagiarize somebody, E&O doesn't cover that.
But there is that risk.
Yeah. And usually you don't bind it until the end because you do have to say, like, we did all these things. And also includes, like, if somebody comes back, let's say you forgot to, some wonderful producer or production manager along the chain forgot to get a cast member to sign their release agreement. And so you don't actually have their release form. When you do E&O insurance, it only covers for you saying you got the release form. So, insurance companies will try to get out of it if they can. So just do your due diligence so they can't.
Yeah. And I've worked on projects where they hired, so they hired out for E&O. So there's companies that do that. They do the research, right? Is that, yeah.
You hire a clearance.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's not something that the average person can do. Like, they're not an investigative report, like, they just can't do that. They can't find everything. So you kind of tend to hire out for that to cover your ass.
www.indyclear.com.
Oh, www.indyclear.com org. Okay. Boom, right there.
That's one of them.
Love that.
I know I'm getting down the weeds. One last question.
Yep.
As a producer, are you suddenly very careful about people coming up to you with their ideas? Because later they're going to say, well, and it could be something you're already working on, and then they come back. Do you start to build? I know the studios are doing this now. They will not just look at certain scripts because they're afraid if they look at it and there's something they did even similar, they're going to be in this situation where somebody can say, well, you stole that idea from me. Because do you know anything about this, or am I just being...
Can you protect ideas, though? If it's an idea,
Well, you guys you're talking about two separate but very intertwined things. So yes, that's why most scripts, most studios, most agents, most production companies, most anybody says they have an unsolicited scripts, no non-solicited material policy. But of course, nobody can protect an idea. So if I harass you on the side of the street, I'm like, by the way, I have this amazing idea about, aliens who attack the world. And then later he makes a movie about aliens attacking the world. I have no case if I say, I told him that's my idea. It's not the idea that is actually copyrightable. It's the expression of the idea. So once somebody writes it down, once it's in a script, once it's in a treatment form, and that is the matter that's getting transmitted, that is where you can get into sticky legal territory. So yeah, frankly, people do sometimes send me scripts out of the blue. My email is no longer an IMDb. But and there's really nothing I can do if someone just sends it to me and sends it to my inbox, even if I don't read it. Nobody has yet said, like, hey, you did this thing and this was my idea. I did work on a project once where there was some issue over writing credit, but we had, we had contracts fully in place. We had the person who was, we had somebody who was a consultant who then later said, I think I should have a co-writing credit. But because thankfully I had really good mentors and been through the process before, we had already had a contract in place with this person that said, no, you're a consultant, not a writer. The writer never sent the final draft file. That the writer always maintained the actual working draft. The person only ever saw drafts and gave notes on it per our agreement. That's what the agreement was. So there was no, that person was getting kind of strange, but because we had a very locked down, chain of contracts, chain of title based with the contracts, they didn't have a case. So that is why it is always good. And of course, everyone started as friends and people start getting weird. That's why you have contracts. It's, you work with your friends usually when you're starting out, especially, and that is for the best, but that's also sometimes for the worst. And sometimes it's easier to have a relationship go bad with somebody that you don't know about or care about before you get started. So, but I'm still working with my best friends. So sometimes it works great. Yeah.
I'm going to we have been talking for over an hour already. I just looked down at Mickey's big hand is on the 10. It's amazing. So, technically we only have 20 minutes. I don't know if we can go over, but I just want to do a check-in real quick. We're getting some great conversation here, so I'm allowing these, especially with the legal ones. We kind of figured this one was going to be an interesting one. Are we hitting your mark here? helpful? I mean, are we guiding on, or should we just blast through the rest? Yeah? Okay, that's good. Okay, good. Well, yeah, here we go. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
What do you, each of you, wish you would have been doing 10 years ago to make your producing life easier now?
Good, I gotta think about it.
What do we wish we were doing 10 years ago to make our producing life easier today? For me, I would have purchased more Microsoft stock. 10 years ago.
20 years ago.
I think just getting out there, making my own stuff, and helping as many people as I possibly could make their stuff. Yeah. Because you spoke about this on the panel the other night, but there's sort of a cache, or maybe Jonah did, but there's kind of a cachet in helping. You go out and you help, and then it comes back big time. And so that I wish that I had been way more active and seeking out other projects just to help however I could. If they needed a PA or they needed someone to clean out the fucking toilet, like I just wish that I had been out there and helping more. Because now, it's like, I've helped a fair amount and I get help, but I'm like, oh man, I could always use more help. And so that's what I would be doing.
That's great. I believe in that. The service model is what I call it. How can I serve you? How can I use my talents, my skills, my connections to help you tell the story on film? Actually, not just tell a story, but tell an honest and compelling story on film. Make it astonishing. So the service model, I'm loving that. Yeah, Heather.
I think, letting yourself take more risks. I mean, I wish I would have started 20 years ago. I didn't get serious about it till pretty recently, and I'm 51. I'm I wish I started doing some things when I was young, but I always have kind of stuck to the safe path. And you have to have a day job, and you have to do all these things. And I just quit my day job. Everybody tells
literally
you
just quit her day job.
Everybody tells you never to do that, and I'm still freaking out about it. But I really want to give this a go, at least for a period of time, full time, and see what I can do with it. So I just wish, when I was 25 or 35 or whatever, that I would have listened to myself more than all those other voices, including my parents and all those people. Like, you can't make a living doing this. This is too risky. You gotta do this instead. Do what you want to do. I mean, you don't have to go crazy, but let yourself take some of those risks.
How true is that? It takes courage to be happy.
Yeah, I think everybody's pretty much covered all the points. But yeah, I was working in journalism, radio, and print journalism, and I was always watching my friends or interviewing my friends who were working in film, and always thinking, God, I'd really want to be doing that, but I can't really do that because I won't be able to support myself. And finally, I just did it. And I am 22, and so I thought, now's the time.
Bry.
Now's the time.
It does. I mean, a support group is helpful. Can you imagine what my parents said when I said, hey, I want to go to Cornish College of the Arts and study acting? Can you imagine? They're going, oh my gosh, he's going to live at home forever. Now, it's true, I just moved out last week.
I was going to say, did you?
But
now you're on a panel.
And now
You've
I'm
made
on
it.
a panel.
There you go.
Isn't this fun? Okay, let's go ahead and continue down. We've talked about the executive producer collecting the, follow up.
Lacey, did you tell us then?
Oh, did I skip you?
You did. No, it's okay. Well, yeah, but it's okay.
Thank you for
Sorry.
Thank you for keeping me honest. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine. I did the I mean, I guess I did what you guys were told not to do. I did it anyway too. I did. I was, 10 years ago, I was living in, on couches and in a warehouse with 5 other artists, just doing nothing but making movies. Actually, I was working on other people's movies, or volunteering on people's movies and barely paying the bills. So I was definitely your parents' cautionary tale for a while. And it doesn't always work out. I've been fortunate that it has worked out in my case, but it definitely doesn't always work out. So I can't say that everybody jumping into it, at 24 is the best thing to do. But for me, I still wish, truly the only thing I kind of wish I could go back and do is just be generating more material. I put my own writing aside for too long, and I let that really underdevelop, which I've now been as I go forward in my career, like, you know, oh, I've missed that. That's why I got into it. Like, don't forget to put my own voice in there too. And then also, I was working so intensely with the same couple of directors, and I have worked with other directors, and that's been really wonderful. But I just wish I'd been generating more material from other places. So there's really just, I don't know. There's always more time in the day. I wish I'd found more of it when I actually, you know, was 25, because now I'm not 25 anymore. I just sleep earlier and later. So I feel like I should have put more energy into it 10 years ago. So do it now so you don't regret it 10 years from now.
Love that, yeah. My dinner time is much earlier, too. 5 o'clock. Okay, thank you for keeping me honest on that one. Sorry, I did not. Okay, let's go ahead and just recap. We talked about executive producer. Really, within the examples that we've been giving is someone who, hey, I hear a story idea that I like. Let's start assembling the team. Let's start building the team. Let's start moving this forward. Let's start looking at other talent we can bring on, which led us to the line producer. The line producer, someone who's looking at the ledger, keeping the numbers, raising red flags when those numbers are outside of parameters and stuff like that, and keeping us going, which is going to lead us to our next one is producer. Producer. And I bet you thought the producer did all of these things, right? It's more than just... There's so many definitions of a producer. So, all right, everybody, same question to you guys. What the heck is a producer? No cheating, looking on Google. Okay. Locations. Locations? Okay, someone who finds locations. Popcorn, it's okay, just shut them out.
Bringing the assets of the actual film together.
Bringing the assets of the actual film together. And assets, you mean?
Crew, location.
Crew, location, okay.
Kind of looking at the first start of the budget.
Hardware, software, the budgetary component to it. Okay. All of it. Okay. Next one. Popcorn. It's okay. Just shut it up.
Keeping the director on track.
Keeping the director on track. Okay. Okay. What else do we have here? What else does a producer do? Yeah, Ayla.
Finalizing decisions.
Finalizing decisions. Okay. Part of the process to just make a choice and go. Sometimes that's the hardest point, isn't it? Sometimes just getting to an answer is such a relief. On that one. Okay. Schedule. Okay. All right. Schedule. Let's see how it matches up against what the dictionary definition says. A film producer is a person who oversees the production of a film, either employed by a production company or working independently. Producers plan and coordinate various aspects of the film production, such as selecting the script, coordinating the writing, directing, and editing, and arranging the financing. Wow, that kind of sounds like the previous things that we talked about, isn't it? Right? You kind of see where there's an overlap there? But that doesn't mean the key word I just want to make sure people hear is overseas. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. So you have your line producer. You get your talent to, so you're overseeing you are overseeing the store. Overseas is the key word. Who here has been a producer? I think we all have been a producer. Who would like to start on this one?
Yeah, I feel like I remember my parents used to always ask me when I told them, like, oh yeah, I don't want to be a director, I want to be a producer. And they're like, what does a producer do? And I was like, oh, this is so hard to answer. And then my second feature we made on their property in Central Washington. And then one day I came back in and my parents were like, I know why you have so much trouble telling us now. You do everything. And that was, a 12-person crew. So, I wasn't doing everything, but I was doing 30% of the everything, because there was no craft service. There was no, production manager there. I was the line producer. I was, yes, overseas is the operative word. And this goes back to, I think, why there was some confusion over wait, does the executive producer hire the producer? Does the producer hire the executive producer? It really is project dependent. So as a producer, as a capital P producer, typically how I work is I work with the writer and or director. So usually I tend to work with writer directors, so it's usually the same person. But for example, in the last two films I did, there was, directors where they either had a script already or actually, both of them had the idea for the script. So I was talking to both Megan and Lynn when they were in the idea stage of the scripts for both Sadie and for Outside In. So from that initial concept of I'm going to write this script, I was involved. And so, and then those took different paths to finding our executive producer. In Lynn's case, when she had an outline, we knew and loved working with the executive producers over at Duplass Brothers Productions, the two Duplasses. And we've all worked together several times. Lynn was especially wanting to work with Jay as an actor because she's worked with Mark several times. And then we all realized on Transparent, Jay can also act. Like, screw you, you can do everything, fine. Both of you, whatever, we're okay. So that's why those guys became involved as executive producers early on. And so at that point, on that production, I'd started from the pre-script stage with Lynn, but because they are such experienced executive producers and have a production company, which came with an amazing, producer, Mel Eslin. So now, really in that case, then I basically, instead of her becoming my producer partner, I basically became her producing partner because they're such a well-oiled indie machine. But we all worked together from that point all the way through post-production. And then on that one, because also now, Duplasses, they have their own, Mel, they're all running this, well-oiled machine, and they have all of their distribution deals, everything in place. I didn't have to do too much in distribution in that one. So, and that's how executive producers work together on that film. And then on Sadie, also, so Megan came to me in the I have an idea phase, read the first draft of the script, a short 8 years later, we finally made it. And in that case, I was, Megan and I took that out to many different people and places and things to try to get that movie made. And so eventually we had an executive producer came on board as the sole financier. So that's how that executive producer came on board. So that was, I wouldn't say we hired our executive producer, but we found, Megan and I together found the executive producer. She provided the financing. And in that case, she was just a supporter of our work. She's been wonderfully supportive, and, we've asked her at certain times, like, hey, we want to do this. Hey, we're thinking of doing this. She's never been anything but supportive. So she hasn't had any sort of hands-on role. So in that, it's been, the most wonderful, amazing thing, because at this point in our careers, we don't need somebody, guiding that on that particular project and on that film, because as it turns out, both of those films ended up shooting right back to back. Because I was still shooting Outside In as we were gearing up for the production of Sadie, I brought on this amazing producing partner, Jenessa West, and she helped me, and she produced a great film called Lane 1974, which hopefully you guys are familiar with. It's so good. Yeah. So she came on board just a few months before we started shooting. So she was there with me for locking the financing and, hiring the cast, hiring the crew, all that. So we did all that together, and we had an amazing line producer, Jonathan Queso, who got co-producer credit. He did that for both that and for Outside In. So it was this fun little, anyway. So that's that. I wanted to say both of those things because I wanted you to see, like, that was, I was on, and then of course with Sadie, all the way through distribution. We did our own self-theatrical. And so Megan and I, more than ever as a producer, I've been involved with that one till still today. I had a call as I was driving down here with our theatrical booker, with our social media team, getting the updates on that. So that's been the most involved I've been with the film through the distribution phase, because usually the distributors say, thanks, we got it from here, which we were a little sick of, so that's why we did it ourselves. But even on a case where I was on the films from the inception of or just after the inception of the idea, how I, as a producer, worked with the executive producer was very different.
So there's no isolated islands, right? I mean, it's really, really kind of a teamwork. And as we talked about earlier, maybe some of those roles are held by the same person depending on the budget or depending on the talent you have access to. But it's also, yes, sir. Yeah.
I would think it's like, who's got a good Rolodex? If you were trying to find a producer. I have this vision of a party.
Yeah.
At some nice, wealthy house up in Bellevue. And you've got the first 2 scenes filmed.
Yeah.
And you're going to be the talent, and you're going to show it. And then these people are going to somehow or another buy into this. And if they're buying into it thinking it's going to be monetized, they're buying into some share of it. Now, maybe they're going to get shares of it and know they'll never get a penny for it.
Right.
But they're going to feel great and they're going to get the credits and all
right.
that. So all this ego is being dealt with. All this possible money somewhere out there in the distant mystical future that might come to them. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be in the game if they invest in it, and it's kind of a social thing they're doing, like if they were at an opening of an art show.
Sure.
They're in the vibe of the film industry.
Sure.
The producer is the Thing Valley, that
Yeah.
was like orchestrating all this magic to happen so the film, in fact, will happen. Is that a producer? Is that an executive producer? Who's that person?
That could be. That's the thing. That's why it's so crazy. It just depends. Like, for example, I'm definitely the one. I mean, not just me. Also Megan, also Jenissa. But I'm the one with the Rolodex on Sadie, right? I have the same Rolodex on Sadie than I do on Outside In. But on Outside In, Mark and Jay Duplass have a way better Rolodex than I do. So it just depends on what project you're on and who's doing. When Steven Spielberg executive produces a film. Yes, it's usually at this point now because it's a production company, but also because, even if all he's doing is lending his name out of support to a documentary he loves, if you really need him and someone gets a call from Steven Spielberg, like that's going to open doors. So sometimes an executive producer is truly just that I have my name on this project because I believe in it and I will, you don't have to pay me anything. I don't need any money. I mean, this doesn't always happen, but executive producers can sometimes be, I don't need to make money from this, but I believe in what you're doing and I'm willing to put my name to it to help it get made and help open doors if you need it. But the producer is going to go forward and make it. Or that could be even a producer. And that's why, because there's been all of this murkiness around producing credits for last couple years, because at some point actually financiers wanted to start taking producer credits. And the reason for that is because if you are only a producer, not an executive producer, only the producer gets the Best Picture Oscar. So that's usually when I explain like what's a producer. I'm like, there's a Best Director Oscar, Best Directing Oscar, and there's a Best Picture Oscar. And they give the Best Picture Oscar to the producer because the producer is legally, businessy, in charge of the whole production, including sometimes firing the director, which of course I would never do. But that's the person like legally responsible for getting the film done. That's the producer. So that's why sometimes directors do have producer credits if they're truly a producer, but they should only be truly a producer if they're going to do that. But that's why the PGA, Producers Guild of America, started getting involved because now there was a run on producing credits, not just executive producer credits. And so now they will only, 2 or 3? They'll only certify 3, I think, producer credits in any given film. So now when you see a big, huge Hollywood film or sometimes an indie film, with so many producer credits, only 3 will have, PGA after their names. And that means that sort of like an audit that SAG goes through or the Directors Guild or the Writers Guild goes through after the fact to determine credits, the Producers Guild now, if you're in the Producers Guild, you can go through and say, yeah, let's put the PGAs on here because we need to make sure who's going to actually go up and be able to accept this award if it goes to the Oscars.
Bry, if our film...
this is so awkward. I put this up now, isn't it?
If our film They Reach gets an Oscar for Best Picture, what am I hearing here?
Wait, didn't you hire him?
I've got
Are you
my
sure
speech
you
ready.
recommend that
It's in
one?
my pocket.
Bry, you're fired.
This is so awkward.
I mean, he might be right. I mean, I'm big enough to say when the man's right, he's right, but you're fired. You might be right, but you're fired.
Now you're seeing the clear lines between executive producer and producer.
Yeah, but in television, it's exactly the opposite. In television, executive producer is they're usually also the showrunner. They're the ones who have total control, even more so than the director, as you were mentioning. So yeah.
Bry, did you want to jump in here? Let me do a pause here. Mickey's big hand is almost at half 5. Do we want to keep going? Can we keep going for a little bit longer? Do you guys want to keep going for a little bit longer? Do we need to stop? Do we just go until we get kicked out? Panel, how much time do you have? Another 15 minutes possibly?
I was scheduled to be here. Maybe I shouldn't say this. I thought I was going to be here till 6, but maybe that just included hanging out.
Do we want to dig into that time a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah,
Let's just go for it. Should we go for it? Yeah? Come on, we make the rules. Hell no, we won't go. Hell no. Okay.
Will the waitress come in and take our orders?
Well, yeah.
Because I could use a glass of wine if we're going to keep really make this. A PA. Yeah. Do we have any PAs?
And as executive producer, I'd probably end up paying for it.
Oh, yeah, he definitely would. Thanks. First round zone. Yes, exactly.
Attaboy. There we go. Bry's backing me up on this. Sorry. I wanted to, but Bry, the line producer, wouldn't let me.
I was just going to say, I think a way, in my mind anyway, that makes sense to look at these roles is the bigger the budget, the more defined they become. On a low-budget independent film, like Lacey was saying, as a producer, you might do everything from craft services. I've done craft services, slate, driving people around, getting special snacks and things, or whatever needs to be done. on a small crew, you're going to do it. With a bigger budget, those roles are defined, and I, like on Gold Balls, for example, on a feature-length film, as a creative producer, my roles involved helping with marketing, social media, events, and things like that. I had nothing to do with the budget, figuring out those kinds of details. So yeah, I think that's a way to kind of clarify those roles.
That's a great, because I know with They Reach, it was a good example of where the casting, just because it's something I've certainly been on this side of the table enough times to effectively run a casting session. Hopefully Ayla's nodding her head because she was one of the people that we auditioned. She was amazing. She was just recently in a short that I co-directed. She's a wonderful actor. Also, as well as the production acting coach. So you find out where your strengths are and you can really lean into it, right? So you can be able to be of service to the production in many capacities more than just the title itself. And that's why it's tricky. I understand your hesitation because it's like trying to get a clear definition is going to be based on production size. Larger the production, the more defined the role, and just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean you should be doing it, right? Allow others to shine and step in, because that will allow you, as Lacey said earlier, to be able to lean into that 100%, right? Because you're not having energy being taken away from your primary function. If you fail at your primary function, because you only did a half-assed job because you're trying to do too many things, then that doesn't serve the production well at all either, right?
I have a sort of an anecdote. So on Previous Man, I was hired as a locations manager and scout. And I went out and I was under budget and they had way too many locations, but I was doing a really good job. And other departments weren't. And there started to be some conflict, and there was departments were fighting for budget. And because I was locations and I was everywhere, I understood the tone of the production really well. Like I was on the ground, I was seeing where things were working and where things were falling apart. And I started just being a liaison between the executive staff, essentially, and what was happening out everywhere. And eventually they started bringing me in to help sort of navigate and negotiate with the different departments because they were having meltdowns. And I was field promoted to a producer because I was able to essentially be a mediator between the different departments and get them to work and get their shit finished. And so there's different ways of getting into sort of that producer role. It's not just having the Rolodex or whatever, it's like, because producers wear different hats and they have different strengths. And so there are different kind of producers.
I started locations too.
Oh,
yeah.
So, I mean,
that's a good step.
I'd point out there's an internal tension that is unavoidable in all this.
Why?
One time somebody described the role of an artist versus, and they use the word artisan, which maybe is a fudgier term, craftsperson. Okay, imagine I'm a woodworker. You come in and you want a desk, and I lay down and I lay out exactly what the desk is going to look like. I show you the kind of wood I'm going to use and so forth, and I'm going to deliver you that desk, very close to what I said it would be. That's what you bought. An artist. The true artist, I believe, is someone who goes into a project and really doesn't exactly know where it's going in some way. There's going to be some discovery, some serendipity, some movement that's going to happen. Apocalypse Now kind of filmmaking, right? We don't know what the hell's going on, but we set up the conditions for something to happen, and maybe magic will happen. And I think your producer is making sure that never happens, and that's not the process we're doing.
Right.
Because we got to have a deliverable here.
Sure.
And the artist is over here, or the director saying, but we need this room to see what's going to happen here. You'll never get anything worth delivering, which we're not delivering much in this culture that is showing us anything new, I don't think, personally. Not in the mainstream system very well, I don't think. And I think it's because that tension of, I want to know what I'm buying up front. And it's going to be, that's what people are going to see at the end. And it's becoming very cliche, I think, what we're producing.
Well, I think you're seeing there what tends to be very formulaic are the films that are being put out by multinational corporations, because truly their reason for making films is to make a profit, right? that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't also make good films, because I happen to love a lot of those too. But I think what you're really, like, you're drilling into something though that I think is like the most, what I try to, when I do talk to people about producing or filmmaking, I think the number one thing that I think everyone needs to do when they're making a film is making sure that the people, you know, especially at the top collaborators, the director, the producer, the writer, the producers, because there's usually multiple, is everyone needs to be making the same movie. If you're not doing it for your own specific, like, you know, you can have people who are doing it for slightly different reasons. Like maybe somebody really needs a step up for their reel, or say I really need to have a producer credit because I've been co-producing. I really want to be a producer now. So I might take a lesser pay raise for that. You know, there's different personal motivations, but the reason why everyone should be making, especially independent film where we are not getting very well paid, hopefully we will on those points, but you know, if you're doing it, you really do need to be on the same page as your collaborators in terms of what film you're making. And that includes the line producer, because the line producer is somebody who, yes, is in charge of counting all the beans on all the lines, but if they think that the focus should be on making sure that everyone has the nicest accommodations, whereas everyone over here is like, we are willing to sleep on couches, but we want to make sure that our camera equipment is the best possible, then you guys are not making the same film and there will be conflict. If the producer is saying to the financiers, I absolutely swear to you, I'm going to get you a 10x return on your dollar, then they are going to be making a very different film than if you as a director are saying, I just want to get everyone in the same room and then just see what magic happens. Like that is, those are two very different approaches to making a film. And I've, you know, been on films where I have worked with a director who's very improvisational, and she's like, okay, I have, like, these are the scenes, and then we're going to get there and we're going to see what the fuck happens. And that has been really, really great and exciting. And in those cases, it's also been working with financiers who knew that that's what they were getting into. And so they were delighted. And no one was scared, and no bond company was going to come and shut us down, because we all knew that that's what we're making. I've worked with that same director on a multi-million-dollar film starring, you know, Keira Knightley, where the financiers had a bond, and they're like, you know, this is the script. If you guys, you know, if things change from here, we need to know, and we might have a problem with it. So it just, you know, and that also was a great working experience in terms of what the director and the actors were able to do, because everyone got on the same page. And at the end of the day, directors and producers, all of the conflict, besides sometimes people's egos, all of the other conflict comes from, are we making the same movie or not? That's like the easiest distillation.
I'm just going to do a time check. We understand right now we are,
literally Mickey. Holy cow. I was not expecting Mickey.
It's
straight a Mickey. It like just made a Mickey voice.
5:37. If you need to go to the washroom or excuse yourself, please don't. We won't be heard if you need to go. We are over time. We're going to continue this discussion for a little while longer, but I don't want you to feel embarrassed if you have to get up and leave. We won't judge you that harshly.
I'll judge you.
All right. Well,
let us know if it's a 10-1 or a 10-2.
Yes.
Just kind of a point that sometimes an executive producer is just there as a name to bring more money in.
Sure.
So I was just
could be.
Well, I've seen it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My name was tied to They Reach because I'm. You know.
Just that pretty bait out there.
Yeah. So we're still taking funds for our post-production.
Yes, we are.
Look at those producers.
Post-production producer, which could be the very next thing we talk about right now. If you like, if there aren't any other questions, ma'am.
Yeah. How do you learn about distribution, and how do you know whether a film is worth sending out to different places?
Wow. Great question. No, great question, because we're in the process of doing that right now. Who would like to? So how do you? Has the film been made, or are you thinking about? Okay, so it's
a documentary.
Okay, docs. Very challenging. Okay.
And I'm the producer and the director.
Director and the caterer and yeah. Okay. And your plane is in the air and you're putting on the wings even while you're flying.
I think one way with documentaries in particular to gauge that is see how people react when you tell them about the story. Are they, when you say to them, this is what my film's about, does it spark their interest? Because if the idea is interesting, then if the film is well executed, then I think you'll have an audience for it.
Well, it's a local thing, but it's the kind of thing that might be interesting to someone who isn't local. Is kind of the way it is. I mean, I really only made it for here, but at the same time, now that it's in process and it's happening, I'm thinking it might be something that people might be interested in.
Another thing you could do once it's done is do a test screening. You could invite some folks, including, maybe from outside this immediate area, see how the audience responds. And do a Q&A afterwards and ask them directly, what did you think? What worked? What didn't? If you still have the capacity to change things after that, that's a really good way to get some feedback.
Well, since I'm doing it, I'll always have the capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with documentaries, is it a feature or is it a short or?
It's going to be almost 2 hours long.
Almost 2 hours long. I would consider if you really need it to be almost 2 hours long. But what I would say is a lot of documentaries are actually so much easier to find your audience for. So you already have a good leg up. It sounds like you already know who your primary audience is. You were always making this for the people locally who this will be for, right? A lot of documentaries can get funding through granting opportunities as well as through distribution. You can get distribution funds in a way for documentaries that you cannot for narratives. With specifically, I'm thinking of public broadcasting services. Your OPB, the Oregon Public Broadcasting, I think is OPB. You can do that. KCTS, I think is Cascade Media. I don't know their deal as much. I know people tend to go through the POV series, for example, for funding as well as distribution.
There's no budget.
Right. Well, but you could always pay yourself. That's a novel thing, right? And actually, I do think that if you are wanting to get to a wider audience, finding ways of not only getting into those places that have larger networks, but also can provide funding opportunities, because even if you don't want to, maybe you won the lottery and you don't need any money and you can focus on this full time. And I wish there you go. But what you can do with finances that come in for, if you do make a couple of distribution deals, that's then money that you can use to somehow take your show on the road. Right. And there's really cool ways of doing that. So many interesting and amazing, possibilities for self-distribution exist, especially for documentaries. I highly recommend looking at the Sundance Institute has put a lot of information out through what's called the Creative Distribution Program. It's what we looked at when we were deciding whether or not we're going to theatrically self-distribute. And they also, on their YouTube channel, Sundance Institute, if you just go on to YouTube and search for just look up Sundance Creative Distribution. There was a wonderful panel from this last Sundance that had two of their first two projects that they did through creative distribution. There's 2 narrative producers, but also 2 documentary producers, and they really break down how that both projects, but how the documentary projects were able to find their audience. I would definitely do test screenings. I would, and one of the things you can also do if you're trying to get to some of these other platforms is a lot of people doing documentaries will do like a 10-minute, trailer. So it's more than a trailer, it gives you a couple of scenes. The folks I know who are making this great documentary up in Seattle called Sweetheart Deal have been able to go through and get a lot of funding that way. But I would also look at what's the documentary festival in Montana? Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. Look into that. It is a really great, it's sort of like the AFM, but for documentaries. It's both a film festival as well as they show works in progress, and they have documentary buyers there. So even if you can't attend that festival, see what they've put out online in terms of their website as well as YouTube. You would be, I'm sure most of you guys know in this room, you can get a whole film education, including distribution, just on YouTube. It's fantastic.
Is there a way, see, this is about an organization that raises money for charity. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to fix it so that any proceeds go to the charity?
Absolutely. You can set that up however you want. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that would be a really interesting model. Maybe you could do a thing where, you take it on the road and X percent of your ticket sales go to the charity after you've paid for the cost of doing it. There's, especially if that's your, you could do a Kickstarter. You couldn't do a Kickstarter for and still get the tax write-off. But you could do what's the other one? Indiegogo. Indiegogo, you can fund the funds to a 501c3, and then the person who writes that would also still get the tax write-off. So that there's definitely some really interesting models there for documentary that I'm very jealous of. Yeah, good luck.
That's a tricky one, right? How do you know that there's an appetite for the story that you want to tell before you put all your time and energy in before you start the production? And in part of our pre-production process, one of those things that our director did is he created a fake trailer and submitted it to a film festival, in which case he took 3rd place. And then he started building out a larger screen treatment, and that's where Bry and I came in going, wow, there's clearly an appetite for this type of story. Let's go ahead and build it up, because we have to get to some point where it's like, how do we know it's going to be viable to some degree? Because there's no guarantees, right? Look at Solo, the Star Wars story Solo that came out from Disney. I mean, the Star Wars franchise is very powerful, and it didn't do so well. You could throw $200 million at it.
Yeah, it still made some money.
It still made some money just because of the name of Star Wars, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue that.
But I mean,
shouldn't have fired their directors.
Because otherwise, the big houses would be making hits all the time, right? So how do we lower level production? So making a trailer. We also created another trailer for when we decided to do Indiegogo, our Indiegogo campaign, because it can be challenging to get non-creative people to think creatively and therefore give up dollars to understand what the project is. So what we did is we made a scene from a film to give us a proof of concept. And that did more than one thing. Not only did it introduce our characters, though we ended up changing it for the final production, but it also showed our savvy with the camera, with editing, our technical ability as well as, and that was very successful. We smashed our Indiegogo goal by putting that upfront work. That also validated that there's an appetite for this kind of story for us to be able to put out there. And then the rest, you just try to be, like we talked about the roles before, you try to be as specific, try to stick within the parameters, make sure everyone's making the same movie, and you just go through as best you can and make those hard decisions when they come up. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. You said you and Bry would come back from, where was it?
The American Film Market.
AFM, Lacey mentioned AFM, American Film Market. It's the largest, that's the largest market for buying and selling films in the States or on this continent, actually. I think it's the 3rd largest in the world, I believe. Yeah. So we just came back from that. And
where is it and what do? Do you submit your film? And
Yes, it's in Santa Monica, and it's once a year. You take your film there. Or what we did is we took a trailer and some clips from the film and an EPK, which is an electronic press kit, which is a little kit that tells all about our film and has pictures, screen grabs from our film and things like that. And so we took it, and there are about 200 different companies there. All the biggies are there: Lionsgate, Universal, A21, just all kinds of people are there, and the smaller ones are there as well. Distributors, sales agents, every kind of agent you can imagine, agents for agents. It's crazy. So, and we took it there, and we were hoping to get 6 meetings because that was our goal. We talked to other people in the area, and that's what they said you could logically land. And then we were hoping that at least 3 of them would ask for our screener. We landed over 50 meetings, and we have 26 people that want our screener, and a whole bunch of people that we're already getting proposals. So, yeah.
That's great accomplishment.
We hit the zeitgeist on this one because ours is kind of Stranger Things meets It, and Stranger Things is coming out really soon. The second part of It is coming out soon. All these companies want a movie that's kind of like that, and so we were kind of we kind of won the lottery on this one in a way. I'm not saying we're making millions of dollars, but we're learning a lot.
But you're not saying you're not. And I will say with AFM, it's an amazing place for genre film. I do not recommend it for dramas.
That is true.
I do not. But for exactly what you guys are doing, like how wonderful. I'm glad you guys had a good time.
Is it just features or is it shorts?
Features. It's mainly feature films primarily. There was a little bit of television stuff going on there. I didn't quite understand that, but it's mainly independent feature films, and that's true. Most of the films sold there, they're there to make money.
They're there to make money. That's
like horror films, sci-fi films, thrillers.
Was your director there?
So yeah.
What was that?
Was your director there?
Silas was there
yes,
too.
Yes, the director and me.
Good. I've had a friend who as a director went and with their project and was horrified by the screening conditions and the way, like, unless you have a director who, did you guys have like a screening or it was just the screeners?
We actually we brought flash drives with the movie on
perfect.
it.
Yeah.
And then I also
EPK
kind of
and
huddled
CTF.
behind Silas, and he would pitch it, and I would sneak
Watermark
out around the corner.
screeners?
No, they weren't watermarks.
I
They weren't
suggested we watermark it.
Well, we didn't show the entire. Here's the interesting thing.
I'm starting way too many fights on the stage between these two.
Put them up.
We'll find out next year. Somebody else has this movie.
He'll have a
exactly
producer
like ours.
credit, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
No, okay. Well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, they'll do screenings too. Some will be it costs more, and I don't know if there's like a but yeah, if you're a director, you do not want to go and watch or check in on your screenings because it's just like a bunch of dudes on their cell phones like not paying attention, and it's really really demoralizing as a director. So if you're gonna go, don't watch your screening because it's not a film festival screening; it's an AFM screening.
Here's a secret. Here's something that we've learned. Bry, back me up on this. They really only care about 3 things. They don't care about your passion project. They don't care about how much love and care you put into your story. They just care about 3 things to get the conversation rolling. Those 3 things are, what genre is your picture? Do you have a named star? Is the film complete? That's the start of the majority of the dialogues. Would you agree with that, Bry?
That's true, and a lot of times, if you answered one of those incorrectly, they would just say well, they're not interested.
Because they have their little schematic that goes, okay, genre horror, which is ours is a horror thriller mystery. Great, that's a good appetite for that because people like a roller coaster ride, and that fan base is very strong. They also like to be riding new roller coasters, so having content out for that. Okay, do you have a named star in it? Yes or no? And then, is it finished? Because they want to be able to execute right away. So those 3 things.
Oh my God, you were
Wow.
I guess I'm staying.
All right. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for bringing us all in. Just saying. I mean,
you said you'd buy this for me, right?
Yes, I did. I did say that, so I will compensate you for that. I will compensate you for that. Okay, I just want to look at the clock. Mickey's big hand is on. Siri just opened up. No, Mickey's big hand is on the 51. So should we just take it to say we need? I'm getting some fingers that we need to wrap this up. All right. We tried.
I've got wine. I'm ready to network. That guy first, obviously.
Everyone, thank you so much for your time. We do have some handouts out here. You're not going to go
they're good
empty-handed. And these have a lot of links. You're going to have to fish for a little bit, but hopefully we hit the top ones for you. Hopefully you can understand a little bit more what this landscape looks like. Hopefully you also made some new connections or will be making some new connections because you have us as a resource as well as yourselves. And I'm not sure how we did at our beginning list. Maybe 50%, would you say? I know there's some nuanced questions in there, so. You're welcome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.